A perfect moment is a fragile thing. It is a sphere of glass, reflecting a world of warmth and light. It hangs for a time, suspended against the darkness. We try to preserve these moments, to capture them in photographs, to build our lives around them like the walls of a home. But we always know, in the quietest corners of our hearts, that they are not permanent. We know that the sphere can fall, and it can break. On Christmas Day of 1996, in the heart of a picture-perfect town, a perfect American family's world did not just fall. It was shattered, leaving behind a wound in the national conscience. The victim was a 6-year-old girl. Her story would become a labyrinth of baffling clues, a saga of suspicion, and a mirror that reflected the very best and the very worst of our society. This is not just the story of a murder. It is the story of an enigma, the enigma of JonBenét Ramsey. Before the darkness, there was Boulder. Boulder, Colorado in the mid-1990s was more than a town. It was an ideal, a wealthy, idyllic community nestled at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, a haven for the successful and the serene. It was the kind of place people moved to in order to escape the dangers of the world. The kind of place where nothing truly bad was ever supposed to happen. And at the heart of this idyllic world lived the Ramseys. They were the embodiment of the 90s boom-time dream. John Ramsey, a handsome, successful executive, was the CEO of a billion-dollar company. His wife, Patsy, a former Miss West Virginia, was beautiful, charismatic, and a devoted mother. They had a bright 9-year-old son, Burke, and a 6-year-old daughter, who was the radiant center of their universe, JonBenét. To the world, JonBenét was a pageant star, a cascade of golden hair and brilliant smiles. But inside the walls of their sprawling Tudor home on 15th Street, she was simply a beloved little girl. She was learning to ride a bike without training wheels. She loved her brother, and she was waiting, with the unbearable excitement only a 6-year-old can know, for Santa Claus to arrive. On the evening of December 25th, the Ramseys celebrated Christmas at the home of their close friends, the Whites. By all accounts, it was a perfect holiday gathering, a night of joy, of community, of quiet suburban peace. Sometime after 9 p.m., they drove the few short blocks home. JonBenét had fallen asleep in the car, and her father, John, carried her upstairs, laid her in her bed, and quietly tucked her in. It was the last time he would see his daughter alive. The morning of December 26th began not with the joyful tearing of wrapping paper, but with a descent into chaos. At 5:52 a.m., a frantic, almost hysterical, Patsy Ramsey called 911. Her daughter was gone. She told the operator that she had found a ransom note on the back staircase of their home. A kidnapper, she claimed, had stolen her daughter. The note was the first, and perhaps most baffling, clue in the entire case. It was not a typical ransom demand. It was a rambling 3-page monologue of chaos and contradiction. It was written on a notepad found inside the Ramsey home, with a pen from inside the home. The demanded sum $118,000 was an oddly specific number, almost identical to the exact bonus John Ramsey had received that year. The note was filled with bizarre movie quotes and a rambling, disjointed logic. It was, as one FBI profiler would later state, a note that showed absolutely no signs of being written by a professional criminal. From the moment law enforcement arrived, the investigation was compromised. The first officer on the scene did not secure the house as a crime scene. Friends of the Ramseys were allowed to come and go, offering comfort, but also walking through the home, cleaning surfaces, and potentially destroying what could have been microscopic, critical evidence. It was the first of many profound and catastrophic failures in a case that would soon be defined by them. For the next 7 hours, the Ramsey home was a bizarre hub of quiet panic. A house full of people, waiting for a kidnapper who would never call. The police waited. The FBI was consulted. Friends and family waited. But as the morning wore on, a chilling reality began to set in. If this was a real kidnapping for ransom, it was one that was following no known script. At a little past 1 p.m., a detective on the scene, seeing the futility of the wait, pulled John Ramsey aside and made a suggestion that would irrevocably alter the course of the case and of history. He asked John and a family friend to conduct a top-to-bottom search of the house one more time, just in case something had been missed. John went directly to the basement. It was a sprawling, cluttered space. He first checked a bathroom, then moved to a small, windowless room, a wine cellar. And it was there, in the darkest corner of his own home, that his perfect world ended forever. He found his 6-year-old daughter. She was lying on a white blanket, a piece of black duct tape across her mouth, a nylon cord wrapped around her wrists and neck. John Ramsey carried his daughter's body upstairs. Patsy's ensuing scream was one of primal, unimaginable horror. The little girl who had been kidnapped had been in the house the entire time. The investigation was no longer a search for a kidnapper. It was now a search for a murderer. And with the discovery of JonBenét's body in their own basement, the police's focus narrowed with terrifying intensity, away from an unknown intruder in the Boulder night, and onto the two people at the very heart of this impossible tragedy, her parents. Join us for part 2 of Voices of Innocent, the family under suspicion. A crime scene is a conversation between the living and the dead. And on the afternoon of December 26, 1996, the body of JonBenét Ramsey began to speak. It was a story of profound and intimate violence. The autopsy would reveal the cause of death was asphyxiation by ligature strangulation, associated with a severe skull fracture. It was a crime of shocking, hands-on brutality. Every detail was a paradox. She was found wrapped in her own white blanket. The duct tape over her mouth, the cord around her wrists and neck, they seemed designed to restrain, not just to kill. The garrote, a makeshift tool of torture and murder, was fashioned from a length of cord and the broken handle of one of Patsy Ramsey's own paintbrushes, taken from her art supply kit in the basement. This was not the work of a phantom who had slipped in through a window. Every component of the murder seemed to have been sourced from within the walls of the house itself. This fact, combined with the bizarre 3-page ransom note, led the Boulder Police Department to an immediate, and to them, inescapable conclusion. This was a staged crime scene. The kidnapping was a work of fiction, an elaborate and desperate ruse constructed to cover up a murder that had occurred inside the home, perpetrated by someone within the family. The two people at the heart of this perfect storm of suspicion were JonBenét's parents. To the Boulder Police, their behavior in the initial hours was a field of red flags. They had called friends before they called police. They had contaminated a potential crime scene. John Ramsey's precipitous discovery of the body in a rarely used room seemed too convenient. And Patsy's immediate shift from a hysterical mother of a kidnapped child to the hysterical mother of a murdered one felt, to the investigators, rehearsed. The family's decision to speak to the media so soon, to go on national television with CNN, was a catastrophic miscalculation. The public, watching a grieving couple who did not perform their grief in the way society expected, were quick to judge. Patsy, with her poised, if heartbroken demeanor, and John, with his stoic control, were not seen as victims. They were seen as suspects. A narrative began to form in the public imagination, a narrative that the police were all too willing to embrace, that this perfect family was hiding a dark and terrible secret. The investigation zeroed in on Patsy Ramsey. The ransom note became the centerpiece of the case against her. It was written on her notepad with her pen. Multiple handwriting experts hired by the police would conclude that Patsy Ramsey had either written the entire note or that she could not be ruled out. The long, rambling practice draft found in the house suggested a perpetrator who had time hours, perhaps to construct their narrative. The police theory was that Patsy, after a confrontation with JonBenét perhaps over an issue as mundane as bedwetting, had killed her daughter in a fit of rage and then frantically penned the ransom note as a way to stage an elaborate cover-up. And there was the evidence of the 911 call. Decades of analysis would be dedicated to a few seconds of audio at the end of the call, after Patsy believed she had hung up. Some experts claimed to hear 3 distinct voices in the background noise. One, allegedly John, is heard to say, "We're not speaking to you." Another, allegedly Patsy, says, "What did you do? Help me, Jesus." And a third, quieter voice, which some believe belongs to their 9-year-old son, Burke, seems to say, "What did you find?" Was this the sound of a family in panic after a kidnapping, or the first chaotic moments of a murder cover-up? John Ramsey, too, fell under a cloud of intense suspicion. He was a powerful man, the head of a billion-dollar company, a former naval officer. Police questioned if he had the resources and the composure to stage such a complex crime scene, to mislead the initial responders, and to control the narrative. The garrote, tied with a complex sailor's knot, seemed to point to someone with his naval background. The specific ransom amount, $118,000, seemed too coincidental. The Ramseys, feeling they were being railroaded, did what any wealthy and powerful family would. They hired their own team of lawyers, private investigators, and public relations experts. This move, designed to protect them, was seen by the police and the public as an act of guilt. It drove a wedge between the investigation and its primary witnesses, turning a collaborative search for a killer into an adversarial standoff. Formal interviews were delayed. Evidence was scrutinized through a legal lens. The case became a battle of competing narratives, fought not in the interrogation room, but in the television studio and on the front pages of tabloid newspapers. In the months following the murder, the public was left with a single brutal question. Was this a story of an innocent family, hounded by a flawed investigation and a ravenous media whose lives were destroyed first by a killer and then by the system meant to protect them? Or was it the story of a perfect family that had successfully used its wealth and influence to hide a monstrous secret of murder, committed by one of their own, forever shielded behind a wall of lawyers and unanswered questions? But the house on 10th Street held another set of secrets, clues that did not point inward to the family, but outward into the cold Boulder night. Clues that spoke of a different perpetrator entirely. An intruder. Join us for part 3 of Voices of Innocent, The Intruder in the Dark. Suspicion is a powerful gravitational force. Once it settles on a target, it can be nearly impossible to escape. For the Boulder Police Department, and for much of the American public, the center of the Ramsey universe was occupied by John and Patsy. But if you pull back, if you resist that gravitational pull, and re-examine the evidence from a different trajectory, a new and deeply unsettling picture begins to emerge. A picture not of a family imploding, but of a fortress being breached. A story of an intruder in the dark. While the front door was secure, the Ramsey home was far from impenetrable. An open but little used basement window, its screen askew, was a potential point of entry. Directly beneath this window, a scuff mark was found on the wall, a detail some investigators believe was left by the sole of an intruder's shoe. More tellingly, a suitcase was found positioned directly under the window, not in disarray, as if from a struggle, but placed with seeming deliberation. A perfect ready-made stepping stool. Near where JonBenét's body was found, a footprint was discovered, preserved in the dusty basement floor. It did not match the shoes of any member of the Ramsey family. And a palm print found on the door of the wine cellar room where she was discovered has never been identified or matched to anyone known to have been in the house. These are silent witnesses, physical ghosts left behind by a person or persons unknown. But the single most powerful piece of evidence in support of the intruder theory was found on JonBenét's own body. It was a fragment of DNA, a mixture from an unknown male discovered in her underpants and beneath her fingernails. For years, the sample was too small to test. But as forensic science evolved, it became the case's most definitive and most controversial clue. In 2008, new, more sensitive touch DNA analysis confirmed that this was a complete, viable profile of a single, unidentified male. Crucially, the DNA did not belong to John Ramsey. It did not belong to Burke Ramsey. It did not belong to any member of the Ramsey family, or to any law enforcement or family friends known to be at the scene. Based on this powerful scientific evidence, the Boulder County District Attorney at the time, Mary Lacey, took an unprecedented step. She issued an official letter of apology to the Ramsey family, completely exonerating them from any involvement in their daughter's death. With the Ramseys officially cleared, the DNA became the key to unlocking the case, pointing the investigation away from the family and into the darker corners of the Boulder community. The DNA profile has been run against CODIS, the National Database of Convicted Felons, countless times with no match. The investigation then turned to a list of over 200 known sex offenders in the Boulder area, each one a potential phantom in the night. Dozens of theories emerged, each centering on a different potential intruder. Was it a disgruntled former employee of John Ramsey's company? A local criminal who had fantasized about the young girl from her pageant appearances? One of the most compelling theories advanced by a team of respected investigators centered on a man who had confessed, a local electrician named Michael Helgoff, whose family owned a junkyard filled with the kind of scrap materials that could have been used in the crime. Days after the murder, he committed suicide. In his home, police found a stun gun and a pair of high-tech boots that seemed to match the mysterious footprint in the basement. Yet again, the evidence was tantalizing, but ultimately inconclusive. The stun gun markings didn't perfectly match the marks on JonBenét's body. The boot print was a common size, and Helgoff's DNA was not a match for the sample found at the scene. The case had hit another brick wall, another promising suspect, another trail dissolved into ambiguity. And always, there is the note, the bizarre 3-page letter that remains the story's most maddening and inscrutable feature. How could an intruder having broken into a home in the dead of night find the time to sit down in the house, find a notepad and pen, and spend nearly 30 minutes composing such a long and convoluted letter? It is a detail that has always pulled the theory of suspicion back, inexorably, towards Patsy Ramsey. Oh, or is it the ultimate act of a cunning and incredibly patient killer? The work of a sociopath who wasn't just interested in kidnapping or murder, but in the psychological terror of the crime itself? The act of an intruder who wanted to do more than just kill a child. He wanted to destroy a family, to frame them from within their own home, leaving behind a perfect puzzle of suspicion that would haunt them forever. In the end, the evidence in the JonBenét Ramsey case doesn't just point in two directions. It pulls the entire mystery apart at the seams. Every clue that points to an intruder is countered by a clue that points to the family. And every piece of evidence that suggests the family is weakened by the hard, scientific fact of that unidentified male DNA. The case is a perfect paradox, an impossible equation with no clean answer. Join us for the final part of Voices of Innocent, the legacy of a question. A story, once it leaves the hands of those who lived it, takes on a life of its own. It ceases to be a simple sequence of events and becomes a piece of public property, shaped and distorted by the glare of a million eyes. For the JonBenét Ramsey case, that transformation was brutal, and it was total. It became not just a murder investigation, but one of the first and greatest tragedies of the 24-hour news cycle. At the center of that media storm was a profound and often forgotten human tragedy. Patsy Ramsey, once a beauty queen, lived the rest of her life under the shadow of accusation. She was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 1993, and the immense stress of the investigation and public condemnation took a profound toll on her health. She maintained her innocence with unwavering strength until her death in 2006, never seeing justice for her daughter. John Ramsey lost not only his daughter, but also his wife, his fortune, and his reputation. He moved from city to city, trying to rebuild a life from the ashes, all while being branded by much of the public as either a liar or a killer. The legacy for the Ramsey family was not just one of loss, but of a unique and terrible kind of purgatory forever, chained to a crime they insisted they did not commit. Today, the case of JonBenét Ramsey remains officially open, cold, but not forgotten. It has been passed down through generations of Boulder Police detectives, a legendary and intimidating file for any investigator to inherit. In the years since the official exoneration by the district attorney, the focus of the investigation has remained squarely on the unidentified male DNA. That single genetic fingerprint is still the case's best, and perhaps final, hope for a resolution. Forensic genealogy, the same revolutionary science that identified the boy in the box, offers a tantalizing possibility. If that unknown male's DNA profile could be uploaded to public genealogy databases, a match or a relative of a match could potentially be found. Yet for years, and for reasons that remain a source of intense public debate and frustration, the Boulder Police Department has been reluctant to fully embrace these new technologies. The case remains a study in scientific potential, locked in a stalemate with investigative inertia. And so, in the absence of a definitive arrest, we are left with the legacy of a question. Is this the story of a cunning predator who infiltrated a perfect home, committed a monstrous act, and then staged the perfect frame job, leaving behind just enough ambiguity to forever deflect suspicion onto his victims? A criminal mastermind who understood the psychology of a media-frenzied world better than the police who hunted him? Or is it a story even darker still? The story of a catastrophic family secret, a moment of violence born of rage or accident, followed by a desperate and brilliantly flawed cover-up, executed by wealthy, intelligent parents who, whether through guilt or grief, were never able to tell a consistent story. A tragedy where the walls of a perfect home were meant not to keep intruders out, but to keep a terrible truth locked in. In the end, the only true innocent in this story is the little girl at its center. JonBenét Ramsey has been transformed into a symbol, a headline, a puzzle. Her life has been overshadowed by the mystery of her death. But beyond the pageant photos and the police files, we must remember the child. The girl who was learning to ride her bike, who loved her family, and whose vibrant 6-year life was extinguished on Christmas night. Her voice was silenced, but the echo of her story, the enduring question of what happened in the house on 15th Street, will never truly fade. What do you believe happened to JonBenét Ramsey? Was it an intruder? Or was the killer someone inside the house? Share your opinion in the comments below. Join our community and subscribe to Voices of Innocent. See you soon with another true storytelling journey.